All right, guys. So we're gonna do a tutorial on one of the things that I don't think a lot of people talk about when it comes to digital painting and illustrating. So what we're gonna talk about today is a very, very, very simple thing, and it's compositing. Okay, so what is compositing? Compositing is adding, it's like adding seasoning, or it's like an extra level of cooking to something, right? So if we're gonna add composite into this image right here, we have to look at all the elements we have. So I always like to create, images with a foreground, midground, background, right? Now in this image, the foreground also includes this. This big arm here is also the foreground. It's also one of these. It's another one of these that I've kind of put further along, and I've altered perspective a little bit so you can kind of see the bottom of the sword and stuff. Anyway, so when doing compositing, we have to think about the things we're trying to highlight, because my digital painting style tends to be quite rough. Like, look at these edges here, like extremely rough, stuff like that. So normally before compositing, I would like smooth all of that stuff out. Like even these are all just duplicates, but they're extremely rough versions. Okay. So what I will do is I'll get a smudge brush and I'll just smudge these aspects together, okay? So they're a little bit more clean, a little bit better than they were when we got here, okay? So now I'm looking at what I'm gonna do compositing wise, what I'm gonna do to add effect to this. So generally compositing is a pass that I do at the end, and it's when I add lighting, I add shadow, I add effects, I add stuff like that. So I've already got some effects in the form of this smoke down here. You see this? It's kind of dust, cloud, smoke stuff to separate the character even more from the background, right? So what I'll do as well, I'll take this character and I'll take this smoke cloud and I'll turn the saturation down a tidbit so it's not too yellow, so it doesn't match the background too much. Okay, so now to start this process, because I already have a reasonable idea of what I'm trying to do here, okay? We've got these cool statues, right? These all in a line, yeah? And we want to make things a little bit cooler. We've got this character in the foreground, and we want to kind of make it a little bit cooler as an image. So what I do like to do first and foremost is I like to look at all the elements that I have and do some merging down here and there, because a lot of it doesn't need to be separate. But I think we're good with this file. So number one, what I want to do is I want to add a shadow layer to a lot of the canvas, right? And this is like number one, kind of the first thing you do if you're going to do some compositing. You'd add a shadow layer, right? Always select a multiply and just select whatever color. Now, it doesn't have to be red. I just did that for a dramatic effect. But what I'm really going for is kind of like a darker kind of browny orange, right? Now our image is much more cohesive, okay? But the reason you create one of these layers is so you can erase, right? So you can erase from it. So essentially you wouldn't use a warm color, you'd use a cool color. So we can go to a cooler tone. There you go, look at that. Fantastic. So we're in the right place. We're kind of in the place where we want to be. We're just kind of messing around with the shadow tone a little bit. So right now we've gone from that to that, right? Big difference. So let's have a look at some ways to bring in some light. So my idea is I want to have light coming from here. I want light coming down and hitting them on the back of their heads and stuff like that, right? And that's where I want the light source to be. I don't want the light source to be in front. I want the light source to be at the back. So what we can do is, first of all, I like to duplicate these layers. I like to work destructively. A lot of people don't like to work destructively. They like to work non-destructively. I like to work destructively, which means I like to I like to start the process where I am actively kind of like getting rid of things. So what I'll do is this foreground element, I'll move it to the top, right? And because now the color hasn't changed, I'll duplicate this and I'll clip and mask this to this top layer. So here now is his own individual place, okay? So he's not affected. If I erase away this, he's not affected, right? So you see the crazy effect we can get by just doing some erasing and getting back our light that we already had, because we already had that light before. So, and I like to work destructively, as I said. So I don't like to hold back too much. I like to work reasonably destructively, just because I find it to be a lot faster. And my style is more like speed painting than anything else. I'm more of a person that likes to paint quick and kind of be effective with what he does than mess around too much. So what I'm trying to do here is create these light shapes, because that's what light does. That light creates shapes. Light is kind of like a waterfall. It falls onto things and it hits. And I want people to understand that. That's how light operates. Light doesn't operate like some soft kind of like it just touches everything slightly. It can, but it works like a waterfall. Now, the reason I'm calling this compositing, it's simply because this is something that if you were in an animator or something, you would do afterwards. You wouldn't do this at the start. This is something you do at the end. And what I'm doing right now, I'm taking the lasso tool. I'm just finding these kind of like backward edges. And I'm just going in and choosing to erase what I feel. You know, I'm choosing to touch parts of it where I feel to touch parts of it. Now, what I will say is I feel like because these are essentially a lot lighter, the lighting and the compositing's working for them almost like a lot better than it's working for this one at the front. But what I'm going to do right here, I'm going to go to this layer, I'm going to hit select. And that allows me to, back on my compositing layer, just erase the selection. Even like a little bit at the front, just dab it a tad bit. Okay, so just like that, we've gone from an image that looked like this, really super bright and flat, to this, just like that. And that was super easy, right? Now we can go in. So now we've done that, we can go in with one of my favorite layer styles, an overlay layer. Now, a lot of people like to use color dodge, they like to use linear dodge, they like to use all these other ones. I love overlay because overlay doesn't just do one thing. It doesn't just come with light. Overlay does a bunch of things at one time. And it really helps to kind of produce powerful lighting that can kind of can add a lot in terms of making the lights look realistic versus a lot of the other ones. I feel they come off quite forced. And I say this as a person that loves lighting. I say this as a person that, you know, when we was in Photoshop, I was always using screen layers and linear dodge, as I said, and I've kind of converted over to overlay now. Not for every single thing, but it's more often than not I'll use an overlay layer for stuff. And even when I don't feel like the overlay layer is working, I'll just double up. I'll just make another overlay layer on top. Let's make another overlay layer on top, and I'll see how I feel about that. That's how loyal I am with it. So just like that, we've got to a point where we've got lighting going on. We've got God rays coming in. Now for the God rays, this is where I would say we can go in with a linear dodge, with a screen. I'm going to use screen today because I don't use screen anymore. And I feel bad because I used to use screen all the time. Screen used to be one of my favorite blending modes for a very long time. And I just don't use it. I just don't use it now. I just, it's probably because I'm out of touch with how it works in terms of how the other blending modes work. I just think they work a little bit better to me. And I think screen is kind of glitching. And I just, I'm not the biggest fan of how it works. Okay, so right here, I'm looking at this layer, the shadow layer. I'm thinking, okay, maybe we could try a different tone, a different color. So right here in hue saturation, we're going to mess around with it. We're not going to go crazy. Look at that. We're not going to go crazy. We're just going to go where we are. And maybe we're going to go a little bit more towards the magentas. Or a little bit more towards the greens. Turn the brightness down a little bit maybe. But we're just going to touch it. Oh. It actually really looks good all in yellow. It really does. I'm so tempted, but we're not doing that. I'll stay in the blue. I'll just drop the saturation. I think that works well for me. Dropping the saturation a bit. Okay. Now, what I like to do is, with the bright lighting layers, and quite often we can get into a point of making quite a lot of them. I'll get a brush, and I'll get a linear dodge, right? So let's do linear dodge, right? It's called add on Procreate, right? This one right here, add. What we can do is just get a brush and just paint the edges of things. Now, it's most effective if you're going to do this with the lasso tool, but also you can do a selection on the layer that you're trying to paint. So that's what I've just done. I've selected the layer I'm trying to paint, and I can just paint those edges. Instead of it being me trying to find the edges myself, I'll just paint them. I'll just paint them, and then it'll be a lot easier for me to kind of do what I'm trying to do, because they are, being directly painted. And ignore this. I'm going to throw this layer underneath that foreground layer. So those same shapes I was making earlier, I'm going to make them again with this final lighting layer. Boom. All right, so here we are. We're getting there. We're getting there slowly. Slowly but surely, we're getting there. So now we have basically lighting is done. So now we can come out of the selection and we can start doing some effects. So, and this is where the composition starts to get lots of layers, because effects and lighting really are the thing that take up most of the layers in a composition. Now, this is like a texture brush that I'm just overlaying over the image. You don't have to use this one. I just wanted to see how it would look. I find that to be a little bit much, to be fair. But I like to have like debris and stuff in the foreground sometimes. So I'm going to leave that there for dramatic effect. But I'm also going to make another layer with a section of brushes in my effects tab. And I have a bunch of different brushes that I use to create little scattered effects, which just add atmosphere to the painting. They add some depth here and there, okay? You don't have to use always just a light color. You can go in with some darker tones too. Best bet to kind of have this on the top so it goes everywhere. Unleash that clipping mask and just have it on the top. I would still say it's probably better to not have it above this arm though. So here we are. We're gonna do one more pass of adding some debris. This is like that stuff you see in Hollywood movies. I call them flitters. And then we can go in and we can erase some of them. We don't have to keep all of them. We can erase some of them. We don't have to be happy with every single thing we've done. And now, when we look at our piece, it's completely different. Now let's add some final touches. Let's add some finishing touches. So you see those background guys we've got? Let's hit them with a little bit more of a blur. I think they've already been blurred, but let's blur them a bit more. And then we'll make a clipping mask and we'll do a overlay. And what I'm going to do on that layer is get a airbrush, a soft brush. I'm just going to paint some shadows in to separate the forms a little bit. In fact, I'll even drop that into a multiply. I know the multiply would be overkill, but let's all right, so what I want to do here is with my selection tool, I just want to separate the two. And this ain't even a multiply situation. This is a situation we use a normal brush and we just add like a little bit of an edge. Just a tad, just an edge. And we just kind of blur the edge out a little bit. So now we're starting to get a lot more depth in our image. So the reason we do this is because you don't always, I wanted to show you that you don't always have to overly paint everything to tell a story. Sometimes you can do something like this, which is, you know, you can come in and do some compositing and you can tell a story that way. And you don't always have to go crazy with trying to paint everything for ages, because time is valuable. Now, pretty much I think right now I'm ready to call this one quits. Like, I think we've done good with this. We've started to kind of see a better image, but there's always things we can do at the end. So we go up to here and we go copy canvas. Now, if we paste the canvas right here, what we can do now is, first of all, I like to duplicate that. So I've got a copied version. But one of my favorite things to do is color balance. Just always check the color balance. We want to see kind of like what colors are saying and what we could push and pull to be better, and, you know, the direction we really want to go in, you know. I prefer that with the more powerful oranges and yellows. So I'll go with that. Now, let's have a look at doing a little bit of, so we can duplicate that one now. Now let's have a look at doing a little bit of just repositioning. So we hit distort. We just start kind of like taking out those edges a little bit. Just a little bit. Just mess with it and give ourselves a little bit more majesty. So now we've gone from this to this. Not crazy, but we just look a little bit more dynamic. Okay, and then now the final thing I love to do with all of my images is I'll duplicate that one more time and I'll go right here, chromatic aberration. And this is my favorite thing to do. This is my favorite part of the compositing phase. Boom. I start adding chromatic aberration to everything. Now, I always go back in, and as I said, I work destructively. I go back in with a soft brush and I erase what I don't want to be aberrated, so it's still sharp. A lot of the other things I'll leave aberrated because I'm not that bothered about them being that sharp. For example, that eye, I'll take some of it away, but the whole thing doesn't have to be sharp. Okay. So for me now, I can call that image done. I can get my logo and I can just tap it. I can just tap my logo in the corner and call that quits and be happy with that. I think I'll go top corner for this one. And that's it. You know, that's an image where I've done some compositing. I've gone from it being basically a sketch to now it's basically a finished kind of like speed painting that I can post and say, hey, this tells a bit of a story, you know. But anyway, people, that's all I'm going to say about this image. I hope you enjoyed the process, and I hope you understand what I was trying to show you, and I hope you learned some stuff. God bless. Do some compositing. Peace.